say we are stronger now in terms of our product market fit than we've ever been. It's still obviously a continuous work in progress. We're always improving it, always refining it. And I think Pillar 5, 10 years from now is going to be something that is much greater than what it is today. But we, I think, have finally started to hit a stride where we've nailed this pocket of site selection where we do something very focused very well. So we help primarily residential developers today who are building large-scale institutional grade projects at automating their land acquisition process end to end.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to another episode of Future of Construction. Today I'm speaking with Dylan Goren, co-founder and CEO at Pillar. Dylan, thanks so much for chatting with me today.
Thank you for having me, Chloe. Excited to be here.
Yeah, we have so much in common. I'm dying to get into Pillar and understand what you guys do and kind of help our audience understand what you guys do. I have to ask because as founders, we are always a little bit crazy. And getting into this is not necessarily something that is just like an intuitive thing for most people. Starting your own company, especially a startup, especially one that's bootstrapped. What inspired you to start your own company?
For me, it was my dad. My dad was also an entrepreneur, and so was his dad before him. And I think entrepreneurship, I didn't really know anything different as work growing up. I looked at that and I thought that was normal, and that's what I wanted to do. Is being your own boss and kind of defining your own job. So I grew up around that and I got really inspired by it. And I think it caused me to always be a tinkerer. And even when I was in lower school and as a kid, was always looking for ways to try and get friends together and run projects, whether it was recording video games and making YouTube channels or making music or running events and trying to find something to do that we could make that was new. So that's kind of my inspiration, and that seed has been inside of my brain for my whole life. And then I think finally got the right moment and opportunity to start a company like Pillar a year and a half ago. And it's been looking forward ever since.
So tell me, how did you get involved in the construction industry? Was it a family thing that kind of brought you into this world, or did you find it yourself? How'd you get into real estate? How'd you get into construction?
Yeah, I would say coincidence more so than anything else. So there are, right out of school, I knew I wanted to join a startup, and was looking around the jobs on AngelList to figure out where to go work. And there was this awesome looking company named revolutionizing, based out of Boston. And out of all of the companies that I was interviewing with, that's where I wound up. I was in a entry-level business development role, smiling and dialing and talking to real estate developers to help with the entitlement process. So it didn't come naturally to me. I was not familiar with the ins and outs of the real estate or the construction world. And all of the implications with it. But that's kind of where I cut my teeth. And, as a lot of people might be familiar with, jobs tend to compound. And as I started to get experience in that realm, real estate technology is a small world. And so I started bouncing around, working for some other companies. And I've had the privilege of working at companies from 2 people all the way up to 90,000 people when I was at JLL last. So coincidence more so than anything else. I do have, some family members who work in property management and in real estate development, but I don't think it was necessarily by choice or inspiration. I kind of wound up there and then have just tried to make the most of it ever since.
That's awesome. I feel like we all have kind of meandering paths into this industry. It's either it was rooted in your family or you kind of found it. I personally also found it. Even though my family was in construction, I didn't think I'd go into it. And so you kind of just, when you find it, it's like, oh, wait, there's a lot to be done here. There's so much. I mean, it's the foundations of what we get to live in, right? It's what builds our infrastructure around us and what allows us to live our lives. So help me understand, as you're going through all of this education, as you're going through working for all these different companies, where does the seed for Pillar start?
Yeah. Well, I think to connect it to what you were kind of saying toward the end there, over time, I think woke up to the fact of how impactful real estate is and construction is in all of our lives. I started to look at the 4 walls around me everywhere that I was sitting in and realizing that someone out there had to go through the blood, sweat, and tears to figure out how to stand that up and give you a place to live, a place to play, a place to work. So yeah, I think after realizing that, I started to think more and more about this is a really important area. And like you said, there's so much work to be done, so much improvement to be had. And I think that there's a shortage of great builders on the technology side who can empathize with the reality of the constraints of the built world, of the physical world, which is very different than the world of bits, that most pure technology companies are used to playing in. It's not all about APIs and webhooks and pixels. There is concrete and dirt on the other end of our platforms that we have to keep in mind. So, yeah, I think just seeing that shortage built up a lot of empathy for me to pay attention and listen and try and be a student of, real estate professionals, construction professionals, and practitioners. And yeah, I think that is ultimately what planted the seed. I knew I wanted to find some way to help. And, I can get into more and more details on exactly how we wound up doing what we're doing today. But I knew that when I set off to start building Pillar, it was going to be something at the intersection of real estate and technology. We threw probably a dozen different things at the wall before figuring out exactly what it is that we're doing now. We touched permitting, building information modeling, property management, maintenance, and leasing, and then ultimately wound up at site selection and land acquisition, where we are today.
Can you talk about that process? I don't think a lot of us get kind of the inside view of how a lot of us founders kind of come up with our concept or find the niche that we're going to tackle.
Yeah, for sure. It's super top of mind for me because I just threw out a post on LinkedIn today kind of talking about this, but it's when you pull back the curtain, it's a messy reality. And I think on a lot of podcasts like these or in the movies or media, the answer that people want is something with a bow wrapped neatly around it where, someone got struck by lightning and had this light bulb moment of, I'm going to go and automate land acquisitions and site selection or, identifying construction bits. And that's just not how it works. I think most founders who have gone through this experience know that it's really a very long and painful process of trial and error. I think that the seed of Pillar was, in truth, just the decision to say, I want to build something. And the things that I knew were software and real estate. And so I started to build in that area because I knew how to talk to people who were in that industry. But there was no single light bulb moment where we figured it all out. And the way that I would describe it is that it's actually hundreds of what you think are light bulb moments, most of which are false positives, where you think you finally got the breakthrough and then you figure out, oh no, actually it's not. And the truth is something that is messier and more complicated. So at the end of the day, I think that, that process is really just about having a persistent belief that you can make sense of the unknown and getting up after every time that you get knocked down, because you're not going to get it right the very first time. But yeah, it's really about trial and error more so than it's about hitting a bullseye on your first shot.
And do you feel like you've kind of nailed what Pillar's intended to do here with what you what you offer today? And I'd love to for the audience to know what is it that you guys offer? And yeah, do you feel like that's really, or are you still in the iteration kind of environment?
Right. Wading through the mud is what I would call it.
I call it wading through the fog. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Nothing is clear during that stage. It can be super painful and discouraging. But yeah, I mean, today we are in a completely different place than where we were during that phase. I'd say we are stronger now in terms of our product market fit than we've ever been. It's still obviously a continuous work in progress. We're always improving it, always refining it. And I think Pillar 5-10 years from now is going to be something that is much greater than what it is today. But we, I think, have finally started to hit a stride where we've nailed this pocket of site selection where, we do something very focused very well. So we help primarily residential developers today who are building large scale institutional grade projects at automating their land acquisition process end to end. And what that means is that in a few clicks inside of Pillar, our customers can contact thousands of highly precisely qualified off-market leads in a matter of minutes. And that's something that normally takes people days or weeks of time to go and build up, prospect, define that list, start to get in touch and source those deals. We've identified a lot of the repetitive tasks that people are doing and built out a workflow system that lets you get it done 10 times more efficiently.
Can you talk about that workflow? What just visualize it in the minds of our audience here. What is it that a user is doing in your product?
Totally. Yeah. So imagine that, you're logging into Pillar, and essentially the way that it works is you've got your map pulled up and you've got basically a few buttons you can click that will automate your submarket identification, automate your site selection, and automate the actual contacting of those owners. So those are the three distinct steps that I would break it up into. And some of the way that that works is in terms of identifying submarkets. The importance, obviously, is that you can't just be anywhere across, say, the state of Texas. There are specific neighborhoods, pockets, and areas that people want to build their projects where they know there's demand for more housing. So some of the way that we do that is using points of interest. So we've got a flexible engine in our platform that can identify, for example, if you want to be near a certain retail chain. So if you're in Texas and you want to be near Buc-ee's or HEB, or nationwide, if you want to be near a Walmart or a grocery store, you can plot that across your entire geographies, state by state, or across the entire country, and start to use that as basically an anchor to say, look, if I'm within 5 miles of a grocery store, or let's say a comparable, another multifamily building or another neighborhood that has homes at the value that I'm trying to sell it for, that's our way of systematically defining those submarkets across the entire country if you wanted to. And that takes a matter of seconds. Downstream of that, what it sets you up to do is then automate the site selection. So now that you understand, hey, I know the submarkets and the pockets of the state that I want to be in, now we've got automations to say, okay, great, let's start to define the specific types of parcels or assemblages that you're looking for. So the next step is we've got a relatively advanced set of tools that let you dictate in a very intuitive way, I should say, like in a kindergarten simple way. I'm looking for, here's my buy box, all assemblages or outright single parcels that are, let's say, above 20 acres that are within 5 miles of a comp or a grocery store. It can't be government owned land. It can't be open space. It can't be cemeteries. Get rid of any land that is owned by disqualified owners and bring that together for me into a list so I can start to see all of those potential opportunities visualized. And that's basically your targeted list of leads to start. It can get more sophisticated from there if you wanted to. So if you wanted to get into buildable acreage based on the topography, floodplain, wetlands, 2-foot contours and slope, things like that, all of those variables can be accounted for depending on how basic or advanced you want to get. But the ultimate point of that chunk of the workflow is you just did the job of a land analyst browsing through a map, maybe tracing a highway, looking at parcels one at a time, deciding what they want. Now you've got that systematically across your entire market. And the thing that Pillar does in conjunction with that is it makes sure that all of those landowners that you've got, you're able to see if that land is currently on the market or off market. If it's off market, you can see who the owner is with advanced person data to get in touch with them, all the way from the person's name, age, down to phone numbers, emails, and mailing addresses. And then the last piece that is why I say this is end-to-end automation is clicking a button and a bulk mailing campaign gets sent out to all of those leads, county by county. So that's basically the full tour of end-to-end, how we can help people contact thousands, tens of thousands of precisely targeted off-market leads month by month.
Dylan, that's wild. Like, I know your team is quite lightweight. You built this just off like a team of 2 and some contractors?
2 people. Yep, that's it. So it's just us, nobody else, no external engineering team. It's us using a whole bunch of AI and time, blood, sweat, and tears. And yeah, it's been shaped over time. I think that's why I call out like I did earlier. It wasn't a short journey to get to here. We didn't pop into this with a light bulb moment. It's taken a year and a half of building out that foundation, a very wide foundation of understanding how is the whole land acquisition and real estate development process working across a full life cycle, all the way from site selection to design and feasibility into permitting and construction. And we talked to hundreds of people, shipped a lot of different functionality to end up here.
And so help me understand what you've done. I mean, it sounds, 1, incredibly intuitive, 2, incredibly powerful. It sounds like you've done away with like hundreds of hours of work. Like, how would someone have done this manually previously? Or if you did it, how did you do it manually previously in other roles?
Yeah. So the way that we saw over and over again across dozens and hundreds of different developers across many different asset classes, the way that this job is still being done today in 99% of companies across the industry is it's really done through headcount and manual effort. It's done through hiring more team members to put more eyeballs on the screens, more people into cars to go and drive around, meet with brokers, see which neighborhoods are attractive. So it's an incredibly manual process today. And the thing that really interested us is that so much of it was happening on the computer. Although there's no replacing the need to go and drive a site or drive a neighborhood to get the sense of an area, people were doing that just to go sit down at their desks and look at tools like, the City GIS, or, a tool like a Land Vision or a CoStar, to go and browse and find their opportunities. And in some cases, that's fine. If you're a local developer and you're looking at a very small pocket or area, that works fine. You don't really need something sophisticated that's going to help you be more efficient. But there are a lot of companies out there who are building in higher volumes, or just might be a small team that wants to be more efficient, building across, say, the Southeast or the Sun Belt, or a couple of states. And that's really where we saw the opportunity to construct something like Pillar.
Well, and not to mention that you're also helping to identify patterns that, unless you're looking for it as a human being, you may not be able to see.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I think, the world of big data is exactly what that's for, is being able to digest and make sense of patterns and insights that no naked eye could derive. And I think that is really what the long-term potential of what we're building here is. I think we talked a little bit before the podcast about flexibility and open architecture being a really important component of Pillar. So, the long-term vision of what we're building out and the foundation of what we're building out is a platform that allows us to plug in to the whole digital ecosystem of whether it's public data or private partnerships that we're forming with other providers. There is petabytes of data that is out there that these real estate teams are processing, manually with their naked eyes. And I think ultimately we see Pillar as being the suite of tools that makes it, again, kindergarten, fifth grade level, to have software at your fingertips to go and process big data queries and go and visualize that information in an intuitive way that feels comfortable to you and feels just like you were browsing through that same map, the same City GIS, or a tool like that, but with an engine underneath it that lets you generate far more sophisticated insights that help you compound your competitive advantage and understand the market more effectively.
So I want to dig into that, because one of the things that you had mentioned to me is that, unlike, say, a data aggregator who's locking down the data, you guys want to be far more of an open architecture, like a Zapier for real estate. Help me understand the vision, the greater vision of what would I, as a customer, be interacting with in the future from a future vision standpoint.
Totally. Yeah. So frankly, today, this is something that I think gets relatively few questions about. And I think most people want the sugar. Most people want to come into a platform like Pillar and say, where's the leads? Help me win some deals, which is great. That is where we found a fit where we can do a repetitive job better than any other product on the market. For the more sophisticated customers that we have who start to see the longer term vision of this, and I think what will slowly unfold over time is that the way that things are working behind the scenes inside of the platform is that we have built out an architecture that allows you to define and execute jobs and queries yourself, instead of us predefining and saying, we went and out did all of the research for you across the country, and we are going to sell you access to it. But ultimately, we hold the lock and the keys over how the data was sourced, how it was calculated to derive some kind of insight from it, and ultimately what ends up getting shown to you as the end product in terms of leads or market insights. So that's kind of a short overview of it. And I think the long-term vision is that we really see the bar for competition raises year after year inside of real estate, inside of construction. And there is, in our opinion, a historical trend over time of specialization and the need to drill down into niches to make sure to set yourself apart and develop relative alpha to everyone else that's building. I think we are still largely in a state today where if you talk with some of the biggest developers across the country, whether it's multifamily or single family, and you ask what's your competitive advantage over the other three teams that are your size building the same thing, generally they'll shrug their shoulders and say, our relationships, our capital structure. But that, this is not real differentiation over the long term. If you start to get 5 times the number of people who also have money in the same relationships, how are you setting yourself apart? And I think that's really the future that we're building Pillar for, is to say, increasingly over time, this trend of, let's take multifamily as an example, People have gone from building vanilla multifamily across the country to specializing in affordable housing, senior housing, student housing, micro units, whatever it is. You can go off of a long list, and there's a great article written, "The riches are in the niches." And that trend happening over time, not only in multifamily, but across every single asset class. There's this blooming of new specializations. So observing that fact, I think, is really why we built Pillar in this way, is that, today people might be looking for something that's relatively straightforward. I'm looking for, 5-acre assemblages that are near $1.75 rent per square foot comp. But I think over time, you're going to start to see people develop more sophisticated ways and angles of attacking the market. And Pillar is developing the infrastructure to enable basically as sophisticated as you want to get with the market, and your competitive advantage will support it.
What really resonates with me, based on what you said, was, so I came to Mercator and the concept of Mercator through the marketing and advertising industry, backgrounds in marketing and advertising. And we had built kind of rapid market intelligence tools to help understand markets very quickly, because we would be pitching a healthcare company one day on new brand strategy versus an automotive company the next day versus a consumer brand. And so we needed to learn markets very, very quickly. The underlying kind of like opportunity that I saw there was, there's actually no data that none of us don't all have in the marketing and advertising industry. We actually all have the same data. And this is something that actually we get pushback a lot with Mercator, is because the construction and real estate industry has not seen a world where where we're not just competing on opacity. Like, I have information that you don't have, Dylan, and therefore I have a competitive edge. In the marketing and advertising space, we all have the same data. We have access to the same data. And it really comes back down to, how good is your strategy, right? It comes back to the human being. And this is what makes me so passionate about kind of the AI space and the big data space, and bringing democratizing access to all of this data, is that what's really powerful is how it brings us back to the human being, and how the human being thinks strategically and differently, and where they see the opportunities, not necessarily what the AI is pointing out to them or what the data is pointing out to them, but like how they choose to use it is what becomes the strategic advantage. And that's something that I feel like in industries like ours, where opacity has been the competitive edge for so long, it's hard for us to see that future, but it's happening, and it's been happening for the last 20 years in a ton of other industries.
Yeah, I think you're touching on something extremely important there, and something that is changing very quickly, and has already changed in a lot of ways. But as you said, opacity being a competitive edge, I think that's something that might have been left out in what I was just describing, is how people are talking about the competitive advantage locality. Hyperlocality is basically the reason why people can say, well, this is why we build more here, is that we run this local area and we can see things that others can't see who aren't boots on the ground here. And some degree of that will always be true. But the thing that has changed, which is making real estate more like the sectors that you're describing, where everyone has the same information, is that we're living in a digital world now. And I think we have long passed the point where the vast majority, like 99% of the data that people are using to make these real estate decisions, is commoditized. It's public, it's online. And certainly there is something to be said about the 1% that is not online being asymmetrically valuable. If you know the city commission and you understand that they've got some kind of future facing plan that they're about to unveil, and you can be the first mover on it, undoubtedly there's always going to be a space and a need for that. But it's a different world we're living in now, where some of this information that people used to think, hey, I'm the only one that's getting this because I'm boots on the ground and I can walk into, the assessor's office and pull these records and see it. It's all digital. And in a world where all of this information is digital and it's public and everyone has access to it, the people who win are the people who will be able to make the most sense of it the most effectively. And what that means is, who's asking the most effective questions of that information. And a really important piece of that is, where are the tools coming from to go and ask these questions of that information? Because if you've got 1,000 different permits that are being filed, every week across your markets, you need to be able to start to ask systematic questions of, what are these permits doing? Where is the market moving based off of it? And where is the alpha? Where's the opportunity based on what I'm positioned to deliver? So data commoditization, I think, is a very, very important concept that most folks inside of the industry have not woken up to yet, from my perspective. And I think that it's like you said, across other industries, there is strong precedent for essentially every industry seeing this happen as the information gets digitalized. Everyone's got the same information, and you have to use the most effective tools and ask the most effective questions to differentiate yourself in that world.
I'm curious because I like the whole purpose of this podcast and why I started it was because I'm so fascinated with adoption and like change in construction, because in many ways sometimes it happens quickly but most times it happens slowly. And I'm curious if we start to talk about like shifting and reframing the mindset and thinking about things differently. What's been like some of the bigger challenges you've had in, you know, educating your audience on Pillar and having, help getting them to adopt Pillar?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that the biggest challenge that we faced over and over again was, describing this systematic approach that I'm talking about here, where you can line up data and create automations out of it with workflows, being different from going into a tool like LandVision or CoStar and clicking some filters and then exporting some leads. And I think even still to this day, not everyone understands that. Now, I think we've gotten better than we've ever been at communicating this and getting people to have that light bulb moment where they say, oh, I see. I have the keys. I get to control how this works. I get to input my expertise and my market insight into this. And I get incredibly powerful results, like way faster than if I were to try and hire a team of 3 people to go and scale, my insight and my expertise. And that's different than me taking that same expertise and logging into a CoStar or a LandVision account and trying to search and look for opportunities that way. So that's something that for the longest time, we kind of waffled back and forth between like trying to pitch ourselves as something that was similar and familiar to the tools that people were using, which worked to some extent because people would say, okay, cool, I get this. Let me try it. But then came back to bite us because people would say, well, this is just the same as this other thing that I'm using. And there was so much that was going on underneath the surface that was being missed and undervalued. So it's definitely been like a pendulum swing for us where we go back and forth between trying to explain ourselves as something that's familiar to people and something that is brand new. There's pros and cons to each of those approaches. And I think we're trying to dial in on the happy medium every day. But I think what we've seen over time is that just as we've iterated over and over again and actually built this functionality that does what I'm talking about, and people can click the button and see what it does at each step, that I think has been the breakthrough for us recently, where we can actually put a screen in front of somebody, jump on a Zoom call and watch them as they do it themselves and kind of have that realization of, oh, I get it. Like these results are holistically different. And it's literally like, Pillar will go drop a bunch of dots on a map of here's your qualified opportunities. And they're browsing through it saying, I would have picked this parcel. I would have picked this parcel. I would have picked this parcel. And that's what we're trying to do at the end of the day.
I think that's the interesting part here is when you get to that aha moment, and it seems like that aha moment for your customer is, oh my goodness, I can actually input my own way that I look at the real estate world. And I can use this tool to ask questions more effectively, more efficiently, and get a smarter conversation back that I can build upon instead of just let me interact with a product that's been set in stone. This is how you're supposed to use it. This is how it's been designed for you to use. And you have to kind of finagle and figure out how do you get the answers that you want out of the tool that fuel the strategy that is unique to you. And what is your true actual advantage is the way that you think about the market.
Yeah, 100%. And I guess a specific example I can give of that, to help, your viewers visualize this, and this might still be on the Pillar website today, if you check it out. But I'll give credit to my co-founder. My co-founder and CTO came up with this great design for some of these bulk automations that happen inside of Pillar, which are quite sophisticated queries. On the technical side, like there's a lot that's going on in terms of what it's doing with the data. And we got this awesome reaction from his brilliant idea was to basically structure it as a paragraph. So it's like a paragraph written in like something that a second grader could understand. And instead of being a form And you basically got controls over some of the words in the paragraph. So you can go through and say, I want to get, all assemblages and parcels that are X acres, between X acres small and X acres large, in X state and X county. And you've got the ability to start to control and, kind of write your own story inside of it. And we knew that we hit the nail on the head with it when we showed it to a customer, and verbatim the reaction, we showed it to him, and like we were literally like suspended in time, like holding our breaths, biting our tongue, seeing what he would say as he was reading through it and trying to figure out how to use it. And then he just kind of stops after a moment. He goes, "Yep, that's idiot proof." He's like, that explains it to me like I'm a second grader in the best way possible. There's no way that I could break this. That's exactly what I needed. So that's always what we're trying to dial in on. And it's not always easy to find it. I think it takes, like I said, a lot of trial and error, but making it intuitive, that's what it means to us. And I think that's one tangible example of how we tried to bridge that gap. Because to your point, it's very, very difficult to take something that's conceptual from a foreign field and then have someone just lock in and start using it right away.
I couldn't have said it better, man. Honestly, Dylan, such a pleasure to chat. Where can the audience find you? Where can they follow up and check out Pillar?
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn, Dylan Goren, DylanGoren, posting basically every day, every week there. That's where I'm most active. Shoot me a DM, shoot me a connection request. Otherwise, you can check out more about Pillar on our website, pillar.codes, pillar.codes. Amazing,
man. Well, keep in touch, because honestly, we're doing so much that is in the similar space. I think there's tons to learn off one another. And I wish you all the best. You're going to knock it out of the park with this product. Amazing.
Awesome. Same to you, Chloe. Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being here.